All right, so obviously, this season is going to look a little different. We're all excited about that. Closing on last season, I just want to ask you one more thing about it. If someone 10 years from now asks you to, describe the 2021 season, what would you say about it?
Well, obviously, the pandemic takes front and center with it because it was a season affected by the global pandemic. But the fact that the game persevered to play and get a champion, and not just a champion, but a historic one, to have Baylor and Gonzaga, go into the championship game. I think if Baylor had not had that COVID pause toward the end of the season, I think we would have seen both those teams undefeated. They were supposed to play earlier in the year,
Mhm.
but COVID wiped that game out. But I think we very likely would have two undefeated teams playing for the national championship. And I thought Gonzaga was the best offensive team, and it was proven that Baylor was the best defensive team. And it was just an extraordinary performance by Baylor, and really made Gonzaga look like less than they were. That's how good Baylor was in the title game. But in a lot of ways, it was a great year. It was nothing but a challenging year, but it's something we'll remember forever, I believe.
And speaking of that game, Jalen Suggs shot or in the tournament. How do you rank that? I think you hit it against UCLA, if I'm not mistaken. How do you rank that, March Madness moment up against, the better ones?
Well, it's unfortunate there weren't fans there. It would have blown the roof off the place. But to make a shot like that in a game that was played at that high of a level, because with or without that shot, that was a historic, great game,
Mhm.
historically great. But it was just a wonderful way for Gonzaga to end the game. Certainly wasn't palatable for UCLA, but I think for any fan of the game, it's a game they'll always remember, and I certainly will always remember it.
For sure. Moving into this year, obviously crowds are back, atmospheres are back. What are a couple storylines you're looking for this year?
Well, the game's going to be older because the NCAA granted everybody an additional year. We're going to see a lot of older players. And the transfer portal has made it much easier for teams to shore up holes in their rosters. So it used to be when a player left, it took a while to replace that player. Now you can replace that player right away. You can replace them with experience.
Mhm.
So we're going to see a lot of old faces in new places, and we're going to see a lot of older experienced teams. In fact, Kentucky's got the most experienced team by age that they've had since the 1950s, and it's the first time John Calipari's ever had a leading scorer back. Damian Mintz was his leading scorer last year on a team that only won 9 games. So it was a historically bad season for Kentucky, but they'll bounce back this year.
For sure.
But I think it will see a lot of outstanding older teams, and we won't see as many of the younger teams. Meaning, Duke is young, but they're in spots, but they're not as young as they've been. But Kentucky's not the youthful team that they usually are, so it won't look like the traditional, or what has become traditional, sort of a couple of the one
Mhm.
and done teams. And that'll be interesting. And so it's shaping up to be a great year, and I think. There'll be, with fans back in the stands, I think there'll be a renewed sense of gratitude for being able to be part of the atmosphere again.
No doubt. So speaking of the portal, a lot of, different media guys have different takes on it. What's your thought on it? Are you a fan of it, or are you just kind of, I guess what I'm asking is, do you think it's a shortcut for like guys to just, if they're not playing, go to another school, or are you a fan of it?
I'm a fan generally of players being able to transfer and be eligible right away.
Yeah.
To me, it serves no purpose for a player to sit out, and that doesn't mean there shouldn't be reasonable rules that you don't want a player transferring in the middle of a year and being eligible right away. But and you can certainly have restrictions on when they can transfer and be eligible. But the idea that you have to sit out a year when you have college experience is patently absurd. And how many 24-year-old players do we really want? It doesn't make any sense. The portal itself is probably not the best vehicle for it, but that's something that the coaches complained about. They didn't like the idea of a player having a landing spot
Hmm.
and they didn't know about it. Sort of a deal in place as they were still playing, then they go somewhere the next year. They considered that to be some sort of tampering or whatever, poaching, whatever you want to call it. So now you have players that announce an intention to leave, and they may not have a landing spot. So is that a good thing? It's not necessarily a good thing to me. I'd rather they were able to find a place before they declared they wanted to leave, because most coaches that I know, when somebody goes into the portal, they basically tell them, "Hey, you go into the portal, you're not coming back here."
Right.
They don't want to invite players into the portal, but there are certain situations where if you don't want them to go into the portal, you would think you'd want them to come back. And some are taking a pretty hard line on that. I don't know if that'll change in the future as we get more used to this, but overall, I think it's a good thing. You talk to some major conference coaches and they'll complain saying, "Hey, this is going to really hurt the mid-major programs." Most mid-major coaches I've talked to like the portal because they've always lost players, but now when they lose one, they can replace them right away. So it's an additional sort of recruiting tool that they have to be able to manage their rosters. Overall, I think it's a good thing. It's something we just have to get used to because it's different. But overall, it's not a bad thing at all. It's a good thing.
Okay, and obviously this offseason, with some news that you've been an advocate of for a long time, players being able to, profit off their name and image. NIL, comes into NCAA. What are your first thoughts on it, and how do you think it's going so far?
Well, it's going very well. To answer your second question first, it's going very well, just as you would expect. Some people like to refer to it as the wild, wild west because there aren't rules for every little thing. But the wild, wild west is where the rest of the world lives. That's where everybody but a college athlete has lived for all this time, including every other student. So, it's one of these things that's not that big of a deal. We'll get used to it quickly.
Yep.
I don't even think it's, not to your question, but, for me personally covering it, to me, it's not even an issue. I'm not going to cover it during a game and say, well, this player has this deal. I don't talk about what endorsement deals coaches have. Who cares?
Right.
That's their business and their school's business. And same thing for players. To me, the best thing about this is we've decriminalized money for players. It's gonna expand. Players are gonna have full economic rights at some point in the future. Just don't know when that's going to be because the NCAA is going to lose all these lawsuits. That became clear after the Alston case. So unless Congress steps in and says, okay, here's what you can have and nothing more, which I believe they're unlikely to do. I don't see how you tell one class of person in America, here's what you can receive and nothing more. That strikes me as about as un-American as it gets. But we'll see what happens. But it's really been a whole lot of nada as far as the all of the pronouncements for doomsday. The people would stop watching. I haven't noticed ratings going down in football. In fact, they're through the roof.
Yep.
And I expect the same in basketball and other sports.
Mm-hmm. And something that kind of ties hand in hand to that is obviously recruiting. But the new overtime elite league and the new not new, but there's the G League Ignite path. What are your kind of thoughts on the relationship between NIL and or choosing NIL versus choosing one of those leagues where you get paid a guaranteed amount of money?
Well, I think it makes college more attractive. If you can make money while you're in college, I think college was attractive, period. There aren't that many players that are going into the G League right out of high school, but there have been a few. And whether it's the overtime elite, whatever it is, college has become more competitive. When you can make money in college, play on that level and get an education at the same time, or at least start an education, that's nothing but a good thing. So I'm encouraged that the game is in better condition as a result of NIL. The NCAA was forced into it. They weren't going to do this at any real level without getting their tails handed to them in the Supreme Court. But it's a good thing. I just can't imagine that there's any other aspect of our society where people would stand up and say, nope, this class of person deserves this and only this and nothing more. We don't say that to anybody else, and we said it to athletes for far too long, and we can't say it anymore, nor should we.
Okay, so season, getting more to the season, it's in 2 weeks. Right now is kind of secret scrimmage season, right? So I'm curious, when did secret scrimmages kind of start? Did you have one when you guys played at Duke?
No, it's a creature of the last probably 6, 7 years, maybe a little bit longer. I don't know exactly when it started, but
Mhm.
you were allowed to replace one of your exhibition games. Teams are allowed 2 exhibition games before they start the season, or even into the season, but that don't count. So, when I was in college, we played like the French national team or Athletes in Action or something like that to start our season. And the games didn't count, but they were in the season ticket package. We had full crowds there, prepared for it like any other game. It just didn't count. So now what teams are doing, instead of having an exhibition game that might not mean anything to their fan base, they'll have a scrimmage. And for example, Villanova and Duke scrimmaged recently. I believe it was in Washington, D.C. But Gonzaga and Texas have scrimmaged over the years. You've seen that happen a lot. And it's a great vehicle for preparing your team. It's just, the NCAA did not want it to be a known thing. So nobody's allowed in. That's why they call it a secret. It's not a secret, but it's sort of a closed door scrimmage.
Right.
But they're really, really good things. It's just a question of whether you want to make a bunch of money having an exhibition game, or you'd rather have your team play a scrimmage.
No doubt. So this year, we're going to see a bunch of new coaches at new schools. Indiana, Arizona come to mind. Who are some coaches that you think will get it done, at their new schools?
Well, I think there are a number of them that'll do well in time. I think the fastest start has been at Texas with Chris Beard leaving Texas Tech to go back to his alma mater. He had about as good a recruiting haul as you can have, both transfers and first year players. So I think Texas will be a top 10 team out of the gate with the great recruiting job that Chris Beard did. And he's brought a different energy in. Shaka Smart did a great job. He's at Marquette now, and I think he'll do a very good job there. But I agree with you. I think Mike Woodson at Indiana is a great hire. Being a former player there has certainly created a lot of energy there, and he's a great coach and a great guy. And then Tommy Lloyd at Arizona is, I think, a wonderful selection there because of his ability to recruit. He's an outstanding coach, and it's a brand name that gets a lot of youthful energy. And as good a job as Sean Miller did, and he did an excellent job there, and he's a great coach. Because of all that had happened there toward the end of his tenure, I think everybody felt like it was just time that they moved on into a different direction. And Tommy Lloyd is an excellent direction in which to go.
Okay, speaking of coaches, Coach K at Duke last year. How do you see your alma mater faring this year?
They're going to be really good. They've got a few really good freshmen coming in with some very good returnees. They lost a couple of very good players. DJ Stewart is gone, and Matthew Hurt. Hurt was their leading scorer last year, but they've got Paolo Banchero, who is going to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. I was told he had 29 the other day in that scrimmage against Villanova. Very talented player. Trevor Keels comes in as a guard that can play both guard spots, and he's very strong and athletic. So they've got a chance, I think, I think they're a little bit undervalued by the preseason polls. Some of them had them in the just outside the top 10. I think they're going to be better than that, but they're going to be very, very good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now game day is going to be back too with full crowds. You'll be in arenas packed again. How excited are you for it to be normal again?
Well, I think everybody's excited for that.
Yeah.
We're getting more toward normalcy with being able to travel again. I've traveled a fair amount over the summer. I haven't traveled as much early in the season to go see practices. I didn't do it last year at all. Nobody did.
Yeah.
But I after last year, I figured I saved a lot of wear and tear on my body by not doing all that. So I decided to try it again this year because I see all these teams, before we get to the end of November anyway. So for me, that was a strategic decision to see if last year was an outlier, because I felt so good. I wasn't tired. I wasn't as tired as early in the season. So we'll see what happens there. That's just more of a personal thing than anything. But getting back to where there are crowds, I mean, I made the analogy or comparison to a friend of mine the other day that, if you go to a comedy club and you're watching a comedian, the jokes aren't any different, and it's still just as funny, but there's a big difference when you have a crowd of people laughing with you. The atmosphere is just better. It's a better experience. And I think that's
Yeah.
true of a basketball game or a football game. I mean, we saw so many games last year with empty stadiums, empty arenas, and the feel was different, and it came across on television. It certainly affected everyone's enjoyment of it. So having crowds back, even some of the places we're going to be, you'll probably have mask mandates, but
Yeah.
I'd rather have that than nobody in the building at all. So I'm really looking forward to being back, and looking forward to sort of being on the road without as many restrictions. We'll still have some protocols, but it won't be as many restrictions. So getting back toward at least a new normal will be. I'm anticipating it being a lot more fun.
Yeah.
And look, this is a job for all of us, but it's a fun job, and having people there makes it even more fun.
All right. Two more questions for you. I'll say them both at the same time. So, first of all, who are some players, some college guys that you think that, the country is going to find out about this year? And then what teams are you high on right now?
Well, going with teams first, I think Gonzaga is and UCLA are going to be two of the best teams. I think Purdue is right there along with Villanova. I think Duke, Michigan will be excellent as well. I think Kansas will be very good. They've got Remy Martin transferring in from Arizona State, and he provides them with a quality scorer at the guard position that is a good leader, very vocal, and really good at the end of a clock. So that'll make them a much more potent offensive team to blend in with Ochai Agbaji and Christian Brown and those guys, David McCormack. So they've got a very good team. As far as players, I mentioned Paolo Banchero, and then Chet Holmgren, the freshman from Gonzaga. I think those guys will stand out, but I think we're going to see a lot of older players. Jaden Ivey and Travion Williams of Purdue. I think Purdue is going to they'll be number one at some point during the season. They're that good. I think they're the best team in the Big Ten. The Big Ten is going to be really good again. It didn't perform well in the NCAA tournament. And the Southeastern Conference is going to be really good. Maybe their best year in a while as far as depth of really good teams. So I wouldn't be surprised to see not only Kentucky, but Alabama, Auburn up near the top. And then Mississippi State's going to be vastly improved with Iverson Molinar and Garrison Burks transferred in from North Carolina. So you're going to see a lot of quality play because of a lot of especially a lot of the older players that are coming back and have transferred to new places.
Well, appreciate it again. Thanks for your time, and best of luck this year, and we'll have a good year.
Always a pleasure, Nate. Thanks for having me.